Well, good morning, Saniel Bonder.
Good morning, Ed. Glad to be talking with you.
Beezone watchers and listeners, this is Ed Reether with Saniel Bonder in November 19th, 2021. I'm calling from the Boston area and Saniel's in California. So I wanted to catch the listeners and watchers of Beezone up. We last spoke around 2012, and that was a long time ago in our aged life here. And so I wanted to catch up with you, and I'm happy that we have the opportunity to speak again.
Yeah, well, thank you, Ed. My pleasure. I'm glad. Excuse me. Glad to have the invitation, and yeah, hey everybody in the Beezone.
Well, you know, because of your association with Adi Da and Terry Patton, bless his soul, who has recently departed this world dimension that we live in. I have a number of videos that people have watched over the years with you, and also a conversation with Terry that you had is on the Beezone. So there are some portions of our conversations and others about you, but I would like to catch up with you because I know things have changed a little bit with the work that you've done. And I was noticing that you've changed the name from just the waking down to waking down and mutuality. And when you look at if someone were to look and try to find out about you, I guess Wikipedia would be the first place people would stumble across, right?
Well, good point. I should probably go check it out and see what's there. Yeah, that and just Googling us, you can get to our rather antiquated website, sanielandlinda.com. Linda,
Right.
my wife, Linda Groves Bonder. There's a good, still relatively recent 2018. Linda and I did a introductory overview video called "The Heart and Waking Down in Mutuality." And that's, if you go to humansuninstitute.com /the-heart-and-waking-down. So it's a lot.
I'll put a little thing on the video of that.
Thank you. And that actually would be a pretty good update, although yeah, things have continued to change for us. So yeah, I'm happy to check in again, and just to also honor our dear friend Terry, who's suddenly had his exit from this realm of participation, at least the embodied side of it. Terry and I met, I'm pretty sure, if not the first night I was at then Persimmon, since renamed the Mountain of Attention, January 26, 1974. Certainly we met the next day. We were put on, what do you call it, a work crew. And our job was to pull down the old sheetrock of the outer porch of what had been the hotel of the Hot Springs Resort, Siegler Springs. So our earliest memory together is putting on the work gloves and pulling out the crowbars and having panels drop the desiccated, dried up carcasses of rats who had died in that ceiling, falling on our heads. That was something that always seemed to be symbolic of something. We're not sure what.
Well, that kind of manual labor really did not identify your work within that community, nor did it identify Terry's, because if I'm not mistaken, because I've known you before you went into the community, at least I met you before the community and in the New Orleans area while you were teaching.
Oh, there we go.
Yeah. And so most of your work has been in the academic world. You're Harvard educated, you're well steeped in the traditions of India, you have a strong relationship with Ramana Maharshi, if I'm not mistaken, and you're well steeped in the traditions. You're a biographer of Adida. You've worked with all the editors. You've always been an editor, and you are, if my sense of things are right, you're the official biographer, at least in 1990 or one or whatever it was that you wrote a biography of Adida.
Yeah.
And so from that period of time, you, at one point in time, you gradually, I don't think abruptly left the community, but you left the community to do other work, as Georg Forstein and many other people, thousands of people,
Yeah.
tens of thousands actually, have
Yeah.
left the formal gathering of
Mhm.
what's known as Adidam and gone to do other work that you've done to wake people up,
Mhm.
if, to simply put it that way, right?
Yeah, very much so. And I was going to say shortly after that unceremonious beginning, Terry and I became the first actually editors to join Nina Jones, who is Franklin's wife, Adida's first wife, as members of the editorial team, and started in with the Dawn Horse magazine that spring of '74, and then fairly quickly got into the book Garbage and the Goddess, which didn't last long on the public shelves, but has remained, I gather, something of a collector's item.
Well, if I may, because I was just recently talking with James Steinberg, who
Mm-hmm.
you also know very well.
Sure.
And I believe Adida really had, well, first of all, my impression is that book caused a stir in India because of how he addressed the mother or Shakti. And there's a little piece in that that really is a bit raw, to just put it mildly.
To put it mildly. Yeah.
And so when you start to talk about the mother or the divine Shakti in the manner in which he did, it was a bit, I don't know, not good PR for Bubba Free-John at the time. So do you, can I ask you straight out, was that one of the main reasons why he wanted it off the shelf?
I don't know. I don't, well, I think in general, the rawness of his expression, no holds barred, you know, upstart New York guy. There was a certain level of what nowadays we would call trash talking that came through. And I also feel it had to do with his sense of the relative immaturity of the community and his sense that, yeah, he needed to put out a different kind of next expressions that would be more consistent with the word that's coming to mind is, relatively speaking, the dignity and the seriousness of the knee of listening and the method of the siddhas. which were his two books that preceded Garbage in the Goddess.
If I may, but during that time, he was generating a lot of criticism in the communities, not too far. I mean, I was with Trungpa, so it was a wild, crazy time anyway. But in that period of time, there was also a criticism by a Swami, and I can't remember his name off the bat, who then spurred the book, if the title, if anything, is The Way That I Teach. And then that was the Swami brought the criticism to Adida in a letter saying, tone it down. You know, here, I mean, he's quite a respected Swami in India. He's got credentials in the world of spirituality, if you will, and he's bringing a criticism to Adida, and Adida turns it around and says, my teaching is more of a reflection of you than of me.
Today.
So, I mean, he was getting a lot of flack.
And frozen on my end.
Yeah. Oh, I'm frozen.
There you go.
Oh.
You were. You were saying that Swami was very well respected in India,
and gave a criticism through a letter to Adida or Baba Free John at the time, saying, tone it down. And then out of that criticism, Baba Free John wrote a title of a book that The Way That I Teach was more about you than of him, me, as he was saying.
Yeah, and right, and that book actually was interesting. You mentioned it. It was instrumental in my life after I left Adida's formal work, Adidam, as it's now called. And thank you for reminding me. I do now remember that there was that kind of critique sent to him, and it gave him the occasion to clarify the way that the way that I teach is not the way I am, but something. What I teach is not about me, but about you. And
right.
And it was his championing of his method. And then, sure enough, in later years, he significantly changed his method and also his self-identification. So Baba Free John was, Baba, like the nickname for like brother in the South, where his people had come from. And Free John, Franklin Jones, was a transliteration. And then he, another big change that took place in the later 70s was the announcement of the name Da, which then became the central name that he came forth with various other names and appellations associated with it until he settled on Adida and then added the honorific Samraj, which literally means something like king of all.
King. Right.
So yeah, thank you. That whole time was a daring experiment to try to see if he could quicken people's maturing and awakening.
Well, from my understanding is that he went from that wild, crazy time in the 74 period of time when you and Terry were working together. And then around 76, 77, he started to investigate the ritualistic pujas, the more religious aspect of spirituality, formalizing the divine way of communion after 75. It started to kind of solidify into some kind of codification or doctrinal methodology. I'm going to use religious terms because that's really, from what I understand, he was turning, although the people were not responding as I'm going to generalize. He was hoping that people would just wake up, if I'm not mistaken, in the beginning. their people were not understanding his man of understanding, or that initial call to wake up. And so then it turned into more of a religious or an organizational kind of
Yeah,
thing.
yeah, and right. Generally, the timing through the 70s and 80s, there were a variety of things that went on there. In the beginning, when I arrived in '74, he had a clarification he made that the goal of the work is radical understanding. The means is the ancient principle of satsang, surrender to the guru. And okay, yeah, the means is devotion to the guru. And then in later years, he really, what he wanted went through a shift. I mean, the call to radical understanding and the need of listening is this, brilliant radical expression of the realization of truth, of existence as it is. And that was what he wanted for everyone. But I remember actually one of the quotes, being around someone like that for a long time, a lot of things have passed from memory, but some things stuck. I remember a gathering in, I think it was 76 or something like that. He had come out with the framework of the 7 stages of life. And there, we were having a gathering. I think it was during that indoor summertime when the sacrament of the day was generally marijuana. And so there was a gathering at his home there at the Mountain of Attention, the Manor of Flowers, forgetting the name at the time of the building. But I remember someone saying to him something like, well, Bubba, or Master, I think we were still calling him Bubba back in that day, I would assume that when you have devotees in the 7th stage of life, that's when you'll really be able to trust them. And he cracked up laughing and he said, are you kidding? They'll be free. No, not necessarily. I mean, I'm not doing justice to the exact words, but it was something like that. And it really stuck with me. Not like it's, licensed to me to do what I've done, but
No, but what you
his call, the primary force in him of establishing that devotional link with people who would then come into what, in the ultimate expressions of his work, it's all very much about that guru devotion to the divine, the guru as divine person. Was really became front and center, especially in 1986 and then thereafter.
Yeah, but what you're pointing to is I mean, I have seen it in handwritten notes that in my time, and I'm not going to try to put words in other people's mouths, but I've talked to many, many people. I'm in a continued interview series with Julie Anderson. Mm-hmm. And it was well known that if someone did attain that status, if you will, or that realization, that they would be kicked out of the nest. There's this, it wasn't about creating a corral to keep people, as I don't want to mention names, but I mean, it's really quite a common understanding that everything that he was doing in the mind of the popular believer was all about him, and all the attention was about him, and he was accumulating all this wealth or attention, and you, as a devotee, would never attain any realization, and you would always be locked into this identification of satsang or guru devotion and things of that sort. And that's quite not, and it's actually coupled with the fact that anybody who claims any, if you will, independence from him is almost taboo in the antichrist mindset, meaning that if anybody claims any sense of wisdom to be brought out on their own, and I have to qualify this because there's always thus I have heard got to be coupled with this.
Mhm.
In the mindset of many people within the community, that you are immediately seen as some kind of an egoic character.
Yeah.
And this is where the I think a lot of the mark is missed.
Mhm.
Um, so anyway,
Yeah. Well, in some ways, that conversation, that part of the quote unquote eternal conversation, will probably go on, and people will see the part of the elephant that they can see and reach the conclusions that they can reach. And certainly, yeah, to me, I mean, I left that work in 1992, and at the time, the lore was, if you break the vow and the bond of eternal devotion and obedience to the Sadguru, well, there's potentially
hellish karmas.
deep prices to pay, sticker shock, and and when I did leave, I understood that was not merely political arm twisting, so to speak, that it had roots, in traditions like the Samaya vows of Vajrayana Buddhism. And in many other traditions, it's understood that if you step aside, you'd better be ready to do the deep work that it takes to go further. And however it worked out, blessedly for me, that's part of what, to my surprise, became possible. And so all of what has ensued since has taken place, and whatever it is, a week or 10 days, a couple of weeks away from 29 years that the quality of awakeness, which I use my language in part out of respect, and also because it's more pertinent from my perspective than any of the terminology that I inherited from him. Though, I have my own lens I'm seeing through here, and I'm sure it has its limitations. But for me, my main stand, if you will, about Adida is enormous gratitude for his realization, transmission, and his work, how he was moved to do it. In some ways, one thing I always said to people, even back in the day, well, long before I left, I'd be talking to someone who might be thinking of leaving. And, one of my classic counseling modes was, well, did you read the epilogue of The Knee of Listening? Sure, yeah, of course. Did you perhaps fail to notice that by signing up, in effect, that was a contract, and that that's the kind of character you're going to be dealing with? So, to me, one thing he never failed to do was make it plain. Here's who I am, and here's how I show up, and deal with me as you will. But his gift at the level of the realization of what in the tradition that I came into through Ramana Maharshi, the heart with a capital H, and only was able to gravitate to Adida because nobody else was talking about the heart in the early 70s. And, to me, they are the, the great progenitors of a fresh, vivid expression of the realization of the heart for humanity. And my work, our work, is a further expression and orientation of that. One of the things that Franklin Jones wrote in The Need of Listening was in reference to Ramana. In effect, something like, he says something like, I've realized that same heart, it can be lived in an infinite variety of ways. And my way of living it is unique.
So I hear what you were saying, and I do believe you've always acknowledged a positive, and I always like to use the term, thus I have heard. You've always acknowledged that you stand on the shoulders of giants, as the expression goes. So there's never any question in my mind, or other people who have a sense of who you are. Your work is actually a continuation in your own spiritual journey, because in your mutual waking down, or waking down in mutuality work, it's, if I'm not mistaken, it's not guru centered. I mean, you're not positioning yourself in some kind of a guru. You're in a client base. If I'm maybe misreading it, but you're more in a kind of what I know as an Indian way. It's a circle. It's a mutuality. It's a centerless group, meaning that the circle is where the dialogue ensues and the awakening occurs.
Yeah, I would put it's definitely, my whole impulse upon leaving his work and formally, my impulse was, well, he's comfortable with Guru as monarch, and I don't mean that in any pejorative sense.
Right.
Present with strength is the true meaning of the word comfort. And I'm more of a Jeffersonian Democrat. No wonder there was always an uneasiness to the fit there. Let's see if we can democratize this stuff. And I mean, I'm saying it playfully, but it became the serious intention of my life. And, so my orientation is, there's a kind of primary core of our existence that we could call an existential equality. We all share that one great heart that lives and breathes us all and is coming alive and awake in us and through everybody. And then there are degrees of functional and also generational, we could say, hierarchy, skills, capacities, and who came first and made others possible. And we've had the various generations of helping one another in this work as well, and have gone through a lot of changes in that ongoing urge. To me, it's not so much the kind of willful choice of independent, separate selves as it is the great heart impulse that's driving this activation of everyone. And there's a whole side of it for me, as you know, that has to do with how that great divine feminine, or she mystery, I call her, the goddess, the Shakti, I mean, names don't do justice there, but that was a major part of what made the activation of my initial awakening and the changes I've been going through ever since possible. So that principle of the divine feminine, or the goddess, seems to me to be consistent with the image. When you said Indian there, I think you were referring to the indigenous traditions, and the recognition that the circle of the community is a foundational holder, and people have different roles there, but nobody is the ultimate superior of anyone else. And that, and yeah, that at this point, from early on, I was aware that, my way of describing it is guru is, by itself, guru is a four-letter word. Stick something in front of it with a hyphen and it's on CNN: money guru, sex guru, wellness guru. But guru in and of itself remains edgy and suspect.
You're putting it mildly.
Yeah.
I mean, in an American mindset,
yes.
It is paramount to almost, Charles Manson. It's a kind of, giving your mind over to Scientology. It's giving your mind over to another human being, which is tantamount to insanity.
Giving your mind over to a cult. And curious how vulnerable people are to that in all kinds of contexts that are not remotely spiritual.
Yeah.
You think? But yeah, so, to me, even the word teacher eventually, I felt impinging or confining. It tended to activate too many projections. And well, eventually, yeah, it became more comfortable for Linda and me to generally speak in the coach with client kind of orientation, in terms of the deep work we do. And, we're still functioning as teachers, but we never did. The relationship to the teacher in our work has always been in that context of the existential equality. And that has been part of what has helped many people come into their own realization of fundamental freedom and fullness and authority, if you will. And, conversations could be had about who has exactly realized what. And certainly we're not proposing that it is the same as XYZ traditional realization any more than we're proposing that it's the same as what an awakened devotee would be in the Adidam context.
So let me just get a clarification, because it can be, I mean, I spend a lot of my time in different environments, a lot of places. So I just want to make sure that, because this kind of dialogue or this kind of area of discussion can easily morph into some kind of diamond heart psycho spiritual work, meaning that it's more therapeutic. And I don't mean to knock H. Almus or Hamid or whatever, but we're speaking spiritual work as in conjunction with psychological work, correct?
Well, in conjunction with essentially taking responsibility for, in our friend Ken Wilber's designation, all the different primary lines of our possible development as potentially mature, sane human beings. And that was going on in Adi Da's work as well. He did not, when I was around, he was never in favor of psychotherapy per se, but you know, I remember the early '80s, the pit of snakes. You know,
Well, I mean,
the deep
the whole,
psychology and all of the work he had to do to clean
well,
people.
that's the whole thing about the Oedipal considerations,
There you go.
or the work of the first three stages of life, which is primarily, if I'm not mistaken, if not 99%, 96.8% of the work
Yeah.
that he had to deal with.
Yes. And so you know, what we've developed in our approach is explicitly not psychotherapy. It is about coming into a fundamentally and then increasingly over time integrated realization of who we are that is I mean, for me personally, this, you know, over the years was not something that all the other teachers who showed up, you know, awakened in our work and then became transmitter teachers. Not everybody shared this, but to me, someone's radical access at some point in their journey to traditional language, nirvikalpa samadhi, or in other words, an utter temporary but utter dissolution of any noticing subject object perceiving self in that mystery of identification with the indefinable, the heart, the great mystery. You know, that to me, it even has practical ramifications. There's an anchoring in the absolute that kind of initiation, if you will, makes possible. And those were central factors in my life preceding coming to Adi Da, as well as during my time with him. And so to me, you know, I'm circling back around here, that access to direct, untrammeled realization and integration of the unconditional principle. We can call it consciousness or spirit, you know, all kinds of, we can parse the words and the meanings here. But that is a crucial and central piece of what I would look for people to go through in their process. And to this day, I'm still working on methodology, tactics that might best further that for people.
So let me ask you about the term transmission in conjunction to what you're speaking about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you. Linda and I have boiled down our work to what we offer, the service we offer.
So for people who don't understand, I don't want to just jump over these
Sure.
kinds of loaded terms.
Oh, of course. Absolutely. Yeah.
So
it's best to break them all down. Or, you know, we're writing a book, and in the draft, I've got this acknowledgement. One of Linda's favorite TV shows of old was I Love Lucy, where Ricky Ricardo, her TV and real husband, would say after one of her misadventures, "Lucy, you got a lot of splaining to do." And, what we're trying to do and what we're writing now and in our work generally is do the unpacking, the explaining, so that we take these loaded terms and break them down into actual human realities that people can hopefully to some degree readily appreciate. Transmission being one of them. So what we offer is heart resources for heart activation, you could say. And the first of them is heart radiation or heart transmission, which, people who become responsible stewards of that transmission, really have to continually work on refining how they present, how they engage with people, and seeing what works best. Often on a very person by person basis, or in small groups. Typically, that's how our work has gone through the years. But transmission is pretty central. And then there's also heart education and heart evocation, which includes essentially the mutuality of listening and hearing one another. And also that evocation is, in effect, calling forward the part of the individual that is emerging but not yet conscious and self-aware. So the transmission part is crucial in to a significant degree, especially because the early stages of this work invariably include some degree of a kind of death rebirth sequence. There's a falling away. People often get into this work, have historically, by getting to a point where they felt like they were failures, or in any case had not fulfilled what they had hoped to do in this or that traditional context. And there's a kind of a falling away, or we use the term the rot, colorfully, R-O-T, to indicate that what was previously sustaining no longer is. But the problem with that kind of playful, colorful word, aside from telling people that they're okay when they're feeling pretty miserable sometimes about what's going on in themselves, but it's one of the weaknesses of it is that it doesn't do justice to the fact that this is a primary initiation of the heart's awakening, of a deeper identity coming forward. And transmission aids that centrally. It makes that possible. So go ahead, by all means.
Well, I was just referring, because my time with Trungpa, he would use the term manure. These kinds of falling down or breaking down or losing the sense of identity, if you will, of your previous, what your foundation was at that moment was falling apart. But he always said that was the source, that was the manure where things grew out of. It wasn't something to be put yourself down or feel yourself. That's well, I mean, people even in sports say you don't learn from your successes, you learn from your failures.
Yeah, thank you. I'll look that up in Trungpa.
Always spoke about that. And he said that was the foundation. That was the foundation. That was ground zero. Groundlessness, as he called it. But personally, that was the fodder.
There you go. Thank you.
So I want to go back because I'm really a little bit of a retard. So I want to stay with the simplicity of this. So we're talking transmission.
Yeah.
We spoke about Shakti. We spoke, you mentioned a little bit, and I think we just clarified a little bit of what you call the ego death, if you will, the rotting away. But I want to go back to the transmission and the Shakti.
Sure.
If you could clarify that a little bit in your work.
Thank you. Yeah. For us, and while I got, in some way you could say, intimations of this from Ramana Maharshi, no question about it, Adi Da clarified, and those of us who served as editors and educators had to be very clear on this, that this was not just Shakti or energy, which is part of the way he got in trouble with the custodians of tradition in the other part of the world, but also consciousness. So symbologically Shiva, and that the consciousness aspect, from his perspective, was senior. To me, it's more of a parity in marriage, a two as one. But this transmission works both to activate people energetically and to help them become more capable of sustaining the intuition, the intuitive realization of that conscious principle, and realizing again the non-difference, the deep fundamental non-difference, not only of consciousness and energy, but also using some of the Buddhist language, nirvana and samsara, etc. And so we also, we like to put the understanding of how this functions in simple terms. For instance, when we do this gazing practice that we do with people, and that was, for me, it was the way, the glance of the guru that I received from Adi Da in person alive, and that I got from Ramana's pictures earlier than that, is how we translated that into our circles of working together. But from the beginning, there's an understanding that this is, Linda likes to say, everybody, and science says this today, everybody, everything is always transmitting to and receiving from everybody and everything else, which in and of itself is an abstract statement, but living it out, there's a mutuality that's going on. And the primary force of the transmission is not so much something you feel coming at you from the outside as a falling into an intuitive affinity, kind of like striking a tuning fork. Tuning fork in both hearts gets struck. Or another way to put it is there's a kind of a turning up of the flame of the pilot light in every heart that winds up being the effect of the process. So this transmission tends to gravitate into people's more and more complete, you could say, or full self-awareness as both and simultaneously an infinite and a finite being. And it tends to work that way. If people are moved to give it a chance and explore what goes on. And a lot of what we've done in our work, and that you mentioned earlier, the folks, we've gone through an organizational parting of the ways with most of the previous people we were colleagues with in the Waking Down work in the aughts and the early teens. And I gather they continued to do their own transmission-based kind of service to people as well. But, just to say another thing about, especially for people who aren't familiar with the term and for whom it's a little, whoa, what is this all about? So much of our orientation is, well, for instance, in gazing, this is not unlike what happens between mothers and infants. This is not unlike what happens between lovers. This is not unlike what happens between any two people who respect and trust each other and are engaged in profound consideration, talking, whatever, where we're having that eyes as the window of the soul kind of contact. And as with both Ramana and Adida, it's always been Linda's and my a focus and an important point that once a relationship with someone, a client, if you will, who's engaging in what is deep, profound, and in many ways sacred work, whatever observances go along with that. Once that connection is established and the commitment is established, then this transmission activation, radiation, is 24/7. It's continuous. And there are pieces of it that are paradoxical, hard to understand. But we've certainly noticed, on one level, the essence of it requires no effort. It's what we are being and living. And on another level, engaging in the whole process with people, it has its impact. We have to work with the effects of what we essentially take on. That's not unlike what the gurus of old have authentically done in their various ways of serving people.
Yeah, I want to speak to that because this is where a lot of people think that it's a one-time, one-off kind of process, that you get some kind of awakening and you're off to the races and you can just do what you want because it's a free gift, it's your nature, and you don't need to engage anything more. And my understanding actually is that it's only and Trungpa said, this is just the beginning. This is where the process begins.
Yeah. I mean, in my first book, as an independent purveyor, if you will.
So it's a common understanding, from what I understand from people who tell me, that once you get some kind of an awakening, that you are off to the races, so to speak, meaning it's a free, now that you're in a free state, you're in the already awakened state, then you can just pretty much adapt your egoic life to this new sense about yourself that you have now shed. And really, it's quite the opposite. It's really the beginning of the process. And this is where the mutuality really has to be engaged, because you're not, unless you're going to go to Montana and live in the woods, your life still continues. Karma is still, the power of the higher karmas is still going to manifest. Your life doesn't go away. You still have your life, your family, your job, blah, blah, blah. This is really the work. It really does begin to transmute or transform.
Yeah.
The awakening process has an awakening of the world to which you're associated.
Yeah. And thank you. And thus, the grand bodhisattvic tradition. And I'm speaking from a distance. I'm not, initiated into one of those traditions, but there's a deep resonant recognition and appreciation that the deep meaning is that we are all truly interconnected. And thank you, Thich Nhat Hanh, one of the early users of the term. we're living in interbeing, or we could say interidentification in that greater nature. And so, yes, relatively immature minds and spirits, or yeah, I think that's a fair way to put it from my perspective. It's a kind of an immaturity in that, oh, goody, I got it, I'm done. I'm free and I can be me no matter what. And nobody should tell me what to do. And this is it. I'm finished. And, some people gravitate in that direction. Interesting to hear that this is.
Not some, Saniel, a lot.
Thank you. I really appreciate you telling me that. It further encourages Linda and me to, get this next book done and keep bringing our work out there best we can. Because from our perspective, from the beginning, I called this quality of awakeness, of divinely human being, quote unquote, second birth. And I have, though I'm not a trained biologist or embryologist, I have hunches about that to me are deeply intuitively informed. So it's not a metaphor. It's a kind of replication of a birth process, but in generally a mature, at least adult human body mind, rather than sperm and egg at conception. But I would always say to people, and still do, if someone has this quality of second birth and it's stably established for them, great, congratulations. It's just a birth. Now you have to get a life. What kind of life do you want to have? If you want, you can go away and, I'm using the term, the image respectfully. Adida used to talk about people getting the bone, the dog getting the bone and going away and chewing on it. So you can go away and chew on your bone and do whatever you damn please. But if you are cognizant of the actual reality of our situation, and in this day and age, again, homage to our friend Terry, he was overwhelmed with the image of the emergency on Earth, that sure enough, we're now in full bore from at least the 70s or 80s. And I just honor him for that, and having done his work so deeply and profoundly. Right. But the necessity for continuing both to refine the qualities of the awakeness and to further integrate all the different parts of our being. Again, thank you, Wilbur. Wake up, clean up, grow up, show up. There's a whole bunch of pieces there. And so we would all do well to keep growing. And more than that, occurred to me not long ago. I mentioned this to on a podcast or some kind of online event. Someone, the host was acknowledging that I'm a teacher and had come to be part of what she was doing, and it just came out of my mouth. Well, as soon as you stop being a student, in effect, you've stopped being a teacher, or certainly a reliable one. So to me, yeah, the process of the awakeness has deepened in multiple ways that I feel are worth sharing, talking about, and so forth, and helping others with as best we can. But the degree to which my limitations stand out, it's only gotten more stark, especially as time goes on. And you're, I think, a little older than me. The big 7-0 was like, okay, ratchet it in. Next level of mortality, dude. No, this is not letting up. And so, I continue. I mean, I'm in the process of creating this next book, and I'm bringing in a mountain of research because I'm so acutely aware of what I don't know that people would be better served by my being at least aware of and able to bring to bear. So, and that's one side of it. It's not merely intellectual. It's also serving, my own growth process and continued acquisition, if you want to use the word, of responsibility for what it is to be a sane human being. And in a very deep way, that's what I feel both of my primary gurus and others who I interacted with. Interesting moment way back with Lisa's spiritual friend, Maharaji Neem Karoli Baba.
Right.
And, they were all in their way exponents of and champions of let's pioneer a better human here.
Well, I'm looking at the time, and I know my audience probably has the same attention span in this ADD world as I do. And so I would like to continue the discussion maybe later on, because we've touched on a lot of different areas of the awakened process, but also we've mentioned some names like Wilbur, or references to Neem Karoli Baba and the traditions, not just Adi Da, but the larger traditions of which this all springs from, because there's a rich history of that. But also there's an element of this that I would like to talk to, is that the Western perspective on this in relationship to the deeper religious tradition from the East, where this actually has been more, if you will, codified or defined more in the depths of the awakening process, instead of just a religious belief system of Jesus or Allah or Yahweh or whoever, the traditions that the West has. So if you don't mind, I would like to give you a call again next week.
I'd love to. I also want to mention, and again, I'm reminded of Lisa here. One of the people who I'm much more recently finding out about, actually, still opening the door, is someone who, Georg Feuerstein, was an avid appreciator of, and that's John Gebser. And I'm in this stage right now of being kind of blown away by Gebser. So yeah, there's a lot we could go into, and I also look forward to clarifying more about the changes we've undergone. You had mentioned earlier that we might be good to touch in on that a bit more. So happy to do so.
Well, I'm very happy so, because I'm really enjoying our conversation, and I would like to continue with it, and in respect for time and other people's world view.
Yeah.
If we end the first session, I appreciate your time and your friendship, and I look forward to another conversation.
Yeah, thank you, Ed, and I appreciate your time and our friendship also. It means a lot to me, both you and Lisa. And Linda sends her love and appreciation also. And I do want to say to people in the Beezone, who are tuning into this, I honor everyone who has convened in that particular community that you've, kind of planted a flag for and continue to grow and to serve. Yeah, it's a special something in the world, and I don't know that much about who's there and what they all believe and don't and all that, and what their practice may be or not. But the sheer fact of it is sustaining something extremely important for humanity, and let that not be ignored.
Well, I'm sure they appreciate that. And until the next time, enjoy the rest of the day, the week, the weekend, and the turkey if you so celebrate the Thanksgiving in the traditional manner.
We do. Thank you so much. And same to you and Lisa. Y'all take
All
care.
right. All right.
Bye now.
Bye.
Bye.